Good evening, members, and thank you for your attendance here at this evening's Audit and Governance Committee. Members, our chair is unable to join us this evening, has given an apologies, so members, I'm going to ask you please to nominate a chair for this evening. So to move, second and vote upon a motion to appoint a member of you. I understand that Councillor Edwards, you are able to take the seat as chair this evening. So members, if you are in agreement, can I ask for somebody to move that as a proposition? Thank you, Councillor Dearson. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bredding. And members, are you in favour of Councillor Alan Edwards taking the chair for this evening's meeting? If you can raise your hands, please. Thank you, members. That's carried. Councillor Edwards.
Good evening all, and welcome to the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. As we have no members in the public gallery, you know the fire drill. This meeting is being live streamed. If we have technical difficulties, the meeting will be recorded and uploaded after it concludes and will be made available for viewing the following day. I'd like to welcome Paula Mills, our new independent person for the Audit and Governance Committee. So welcome, Paula. It's nice to meet you. And thank you for joining us. We also have Mark Hodgson and Rachel Merez from our external auditors, Ernst & Young, who will be joining us remotely via Teams this evening. So, okay, our first agenda item, are there any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor Harvey, of course.
Thank you. And item 2, do we have any interest to declare? No. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 3 is the minutes from the last meeting. There is one small correction to the minutes. At the last meeting, the Assistant Director, Counter Fraud and Investigation, informed the committee that the £692,000 value of fraud under investigation, of that £500,000 related to a contractor fraud. The correct figure should have been 50,000, not 500,000. So apologies have been passed on for the error, and we'll get that corrected. So other than that, go ahead, Paula.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if I could make a suggestion for future. I know on through your minutes and your agenda that you don't have an item called forward plan of what reports will be coming to the committee throughout the year. May I suggest that that's something that we consider including so that the committee can have an overview of what's coming through the year to make sure that it's got the right level of assurances so that it could perform its role correctly? It's something that I'm used to seeing on most audit committees.
I think we do that on some of the committees, so I would say no reason for us not to.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Absolutely, we have a corporate forward plan which covers all decisions which are due to take place by the Cabinet and by other committees of this council. In terms of a work plan, I think is what we would normally term it rather than a forward plan. Work plan is absolutely something that some overview and scrutiny committee has, for example, and there is no reason why we couldn't have something similar for that. So yes, thank you for your suggestion. We'll take that forward.
So to our minutes, are the other than the correction, are the minutes of this meeting held on the 18th of March 2025 agreed? Okay. Thank you. Moving to item 4, Mr. Barnes, could you please introduce the agenda item 4, the quarterly progress report on audit, and provide an update on the progress made on internal audit?
Thank you, Chair. I will. So this item is our regular report to the committee, which provides updates on the progress we've made in delivering the plan for the 24-25 audit year that the committee approved back in April last year. So this work will contribute to the assurances the committee receive about the effectiveness of the arrangements over governance, risk management and internal control as they've operated during the year, to help inform and provide assurance to the committee about the annual governance statement that is being prepared for the year and will be presented to the committee at its next meeting. So Appendix 1 to my report provides a status update on each of the pieces of work within the plan. We keep the plan under review in accordance with any demands made of us by the Council, as we help to address challenges and issues arising through the year. As reported at paragraph 4.2, there have been no changes to the plan since the last report to the committee in March. So work is progressing and being completed, and at this point 85% of the planned audits are completed, although there is reports to be agreed in some instances, but these are moving forward. For example, the two that are shown in the appendix as being reviewed by me have now progressed to being issued to management. The last items of the 15% are work in progress, and we're working with colleagues and contractors to keep the work moving and being completed, so we'll be in a good position when we present our annual reports on the year to the committee in July. We reported to the last meeting that the candidate I was in discussions with has accepted the role to fill our audit manager vacancy, and I'm pleased to be able to report that they will be joining the team next week. But we do remain down on numbers and will be seeking to recruit to one of the vacant senior auditor posts once the new audit manager is settled into the team. Appendices 2 and 3 of my report provide an update on the results of audit work completed since we last met, and this includes the fact we were able to give satisfactory assurance over arrangements for the Castle Point Place partnership work. Minimal assurance is provided over data governance, where there is a need to refresh and update roles, responsibilities, policies and procedures, and to reintroduce training and the consideration and monitoring of risks. Minimal assurance is also provided over licensing, where there's also a need to refresh and update roles, responsibilities, and policies and procedures, and to increase oversight by management, reconciliations of activity, and enforcement activity. Thought also needs to be put into the system and how this is utilised to inform any investment decisions that are made on future systems. And then finally, our follow-up of the waste service delivery review confirmed that while some progress has been made, none of the actions have yet been fully completed at this stage, although the new AD is working through a plan to deliver a waste strategy that will then provide a clearer direction of travel for the service for the future that can then be implemented at an operational level. That's all I really wanted to say, Chair, but happy to take any questions members may have.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions on the report? Councillor Deering.
Yeah, thank you. Right, I don't want to bore everybody like I normally do, going through every single item that's been audited or the recommendations that have been made, but there's three things. I would like to come back to Treasury Management and the EGL, but I wondered if I could, just on behalf of the committee, make some suggestions on the IDGM data that we get. I mean, I appreciate it's our role to provide audit governance and not to become the officers of the council. However, at the moment, the only thing I see in the IDGM report is the number of action items. So there may be, for example, 17 action items, but I have no idea what those action items are, the delivery dates for them, what the corporate risk is on those action items, and if any of them have missed the target set by the officers in that team. And to give you sort of some examples, I think if you look at, I looked at the system, and if you look at the transformation, the audit that's just been done says there's 5 action items. In IDGM, it says there are 2 action items and they're both complete. So I'm not confident in the data in IDGM. And I appreciate it's a brand new system. I think it's brilliant. And I think going forward, it will give us what we require. I just don't think it's there yet. So I suppose my question is, can we, as a committee, get more detail out of that system on the things that I think we're missing? And I don't know if that's something you might want to add some detail to in with your better experience than me. Sorry, Chair.
If you'd like to ask the independent person if she
would you like to contribute at this point, or is that a separate question you had?
Sorry, my apologies.
If you don't mind, Chair. Sorry. I think it would be useful if the committee had an overall summary of the position of internal audit recommendations. So having a report each quarter around the number of audit recommendations that have been made, the number that have been implemented and the number that are outstanding, and particularly the number that are overdue for completion. And then for management to provide some information around what they're doing to progress the overdue recommendations, so that we can, as a committee, can have assurance that the weaknesses that have been identified as part of the audits are actually being addressed, and that they're being addressed promptly and in line with what they agreed with the internal audit team. I think at the moment the report doesn't provide us that. So I couldn't be assured that management are addressing things promptly and appropriately. So that would be a recommendation of mine. It's something that I'm used to seeing on all the other audit committees that I sit on.
Chief Executive, if you can take that one.
Thank you, Councillor Disson. Thank you, Ms Mills. Absolutely, there is a report, and so Councillor Disson, you remember when you first raised this issue, we agreed that we would provide exactly the kind of report that Ms Mills is referring to, and that's due to come to this committee in July. So, so that is there. You are absolutely right. IDEA Gen is an operational tool, and it is garbage in, garbage out. The quality of the data that it holds, and therefore the quality of reporting, is only as good as the data that's inputted. So, absolutely. It is something that internal audit colleagues are very aware of, so it's not just taken as the single point of reference. Or the report that's being prepared for you for July will reconcile back to the original outstanding recommendations. It is an operational tool designed to bring forward and alert managers that those actions are outstanding, to ask for updates and to notify them when due dates are coming close to expiration. So it is entirely for that purpose. Members, because this is a new version of the report, it is a matter for you, following your review of that report in July, if there are further tweaks and amendments that you want to see from that, then absolutely that can be taken into account. But if I can just ask you please to wait until that report comes in July, and then we can work from that, if that makes sense.
Oh, that'd be perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just to come in on that point, will we be getting that report at every meeting, or will the report just be coming once or twice a year?
So, sorry, through you, Chair. So, Councillor Bredding, it wouldn't come to every single meeting, because it wouldn't necessarily move very much between monthly meetings. It's been suggested that it could be a quarter, and I think that once you see the data, you can take that view and you can make your representations at that point.
There was just a couple of items. There I go again. Sorry, Chair. Couple of items I just wanted to have some clarification on. So on Treasury Management, the audit was originally a Treasury Management audit was back in 2022. Then in September 23, it says that the audit update is to assess the effectiveness of the key controls, Treasury Management strategy and prevent and detect material errors. That work was planned for Q4 23-24. In September 24, it says work in progress. And in May 25, it now says that the draft report is being discussed with the business. Would it be possible to ask how long will the business need to discuss the draft report before they'll be able to give us any update on the actions and whether there's any material issues within the Treasury Management report? Then I suppose the other question I had was, having got the draft report... Should
we handle that one first,
Yeah,
Mr.
go on.
Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. So that report is with the business, as my report says. So we'll make sure that is completed and agreed and brought to the July committee, there aren't any major significant issues arising from it, so it shouldn't be difficult to get that agreement and then bring the summary to the committee at the next meeting.
I think you've answered my second question, Andrew, Chair, which was, are there any significant weaknesses in the audit, in Treasury management on the back of the audit report?
There aren't significant weaknesses, in my opinion. There are scope for improvement, as there is usually with most systems when we come and review those, but they're not majorly significant ones. I'm not concerned that the council is exposed to significant risks in respect of its Treasury management function.
Just one final question on that, Chair, which was in the peer review, there was a concern that only 2 people had proper oversight, which I believe was Lance and Angela. I wonder if that has now been addressed and if we have additional oversight on the Treasury management process.
Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dearson, in relation to the Corporate Peer Challenge review, that was in relation to budget preparation, not Treasury management. The budget preparation process, as you know, goes through Cabinet, begins in October and goes through to February. So Treasury management wasn't specifically addressed by the Corporate Peer Challenge. But in terms of oversight, for example, what I would suggest is if you can squirrel that question away and when the report comes forward, if you feel that that isn't sufficiently addressed or further strength can be put into the control environment, I'm sure that we would be able to reflect that.
I'll get there eventually, I promise. I've got a couple of points to make and some suggestions, and I've also got some questions. So I don't know how you want to deal with that, Chair. If I do something and then give other people an opportunity and then come back, that probably might be best. In the report, we have the table showing the audit plan that shows the audit that's been undertaken and then it's been completed. It would be really helpful to have a column added to that, or 2 columns actually added to that table that shows, once the audit's been completed, what the opinion was, so that at a glance, members can see the overall opinion that's been given. And also a column added to show the number of audit recommendations that have been made as a result of that audit. So again, that gives members an understanding of the audit. So if that was possible, that would be really appreciative. Also, one of the questions I wanted to ask was around the audits where you have a limited or minimal, I think you call it a minimal assurance reports, where you're not able to give full assurance around the control environment. I appreciate that the internal audit team undertake a follow-up and report back to the committee on progress. But I wondered whether or not it's possible for, after such a report has come to us from the internal audit team, that actually management present to the committee how they're going to give us their assurances that they're going to address those limited audit recommendations and take that forward. I've seen it done various different ways for audit committees, normally a presentation from the senior management team lead telling us that they take on board those and give us those assurances. It's not necessary to rehash over the audit, it's just to get that level of assurance that it's not just the audit team telling us that people are going to do things, actually management are giving it to us. So that's just a couple of suggestions for maybe improving the bits and pieces. So do you want me to stop there and people respond on those, or do you want me to keep going?
Let's deal with those points first, so
Yeah.
that's easy to keep track.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms Mills. In terms of the additionality of columns in the presentation, I'm sure I speak on behalf of Mr Barnes, but that will be absolutely fine. We're always looking to improve the ways in which we present information and to make it easier for members to digest. In relation to minimal assurance and follow-ups, you can, of course, be assured that actions that are attributed to management are taken seriously, but I absolutely take your point that to have the kind of the visual presentation by the relevant service area is always helpful, and I'm sure that again that can be reflected. So the only caveat I would offer to that is because of the stage of development in terms of our transformation programme, there may be some overlap in some of those service areas and recommendations, and certainly in some of the slightly older audits, but I'm sure that we can work that out. That's not going to be a problem.
Thank you. And if you can carry on with the questions that you had.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch on audit resources, because obviously I understand that you've had some vacancies for a period of time and there's been some real effort put into filling those vacancies on the audit side. I just wondered, perhaps maybe if Mr. Barnes could tell us what steps he's taking to complete the next lot of recruitment, but also if there's any particular barriers that he feels that are preventing his ability to recruit to those.
Mr. Barnes?
Thank you, Chair. So I think our experience in trying to recruit internal auditors is not uncommon across the sector. So the other heads of internal audit I interact with are all kind of suffering a similar thing. I think there's a combination of factors for us in respect of, there's the audit industry per se isn't sort of perceived as very exciting, which I would really refute personally, because my job's pretty exciting day to day with the things I have to get involved in. But nonetheless, I think that sort of perception does exist, and it's regarded as a bit of a dull and routine sort of activity. We have, you probably won't be aware, but we have, in September we recruited a new apprentice, so that we're trying to sort of build from the bottom up. We do struggle to recruit, and one of the reasons for that, I think one of the other reasons is that I think our salaries are not as competitive as some of our London neighbours, and obviously in our location here and at Southend, we have had a bit of a brain drain, I think, over my time and before, where people come and train with us and then are enticed away to the city for much higher salaries in banks and other kind of institutions that are interested in kind of audit skills. So there's a combination of those factors, but we are trying. But what we are doing that means that the work does still get done is that we do employ the services of two accountancy firms, big international accountancy firms, which are more expensive, so we don't get as much work done by using them, but we are getting through the work, and I think the plan that we have delivered most of this year is probably more extensive than most district councils' plans would be. So I do think we are, whilst we haven't got as many bums on seats as I would prefer to have, I think we are still getting through the work and still hopefully having a reasonable impact on the council.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Mr. Dixon.
Sorry, I have got more questions, but could I just have a follow-up question, please, Chair, on what Andrew said?
Go ahead.
Is there any opportunity, and I don't know whether it's something we even want to entertain, to have a graduate training programme?
Southend does have a graduate training programme, actually, but those graduate trainees haven't nominated or asked to come to the internal audit. So they do, over a number of months, go sort of cycle through different departments in the council. But as of yet, no one's approached me to join the audit team for a period of time. But I'll keep banging that drum, so yeah.
Good luck. Are there any additional questions? If not, I've got one of my own. Councillor Dixon.
It was just a question, really, Chair, on the general ledger. So now that we started the audit general ledger back in 2021, and I know that we all know the issues and what's gone on since 2021, so I don't think we need to go there again. And I know that as at Jan 24, that dropped off of our audit plan was the general ledger. But it's now back in the audit plan, and the audit has been completed, and the draft report is now with the head of internal audit. So I suppose my question, Chair, is I'm assuming that's a new audit that's been done since the one that would have been started back in 2021. And having done that audit, our internal audit able to give any preliminary assurances to external auditors that our general ledger can be relied upon?
Mr. Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, the second piece of work you referred to is a new audit, as you assumed, Councillor Dearson. That has now been completed, and the results are with the finance team for discussion. There are, again, it's similar to the Treasury Management, there aren't significant weaknesses in the arrangements we've got within the General Ledger, but there is scope for a bit of improvement. So we have made some recommendations, and they're being discussed, or will be discussed over the next few days. And then that report will also come back to the committee in July.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Sorry, but my question was, can the General Ledger be relied upon? If the answer is yes, then can that be relayed to our external auditors?
Sorry, Councillor Dixon, I missed that part, or missed answering that part of the question. So obviously our objectives are to look at the controls and the arrangements within the General Ledger, and we think those are pretty much appropriate for a council of our size. External audit, you'd have to ask them in terms of their own sort of opinion on their expectations, but we will share that work with them once it's fully completed, and then they'll draw their conclusions from that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. And Ms Mills.
Thank you, Chair. I promised my final question on this item. I just want to ask Mr Barnes about the waste delivery service follow-up review. I was just interested to know what the original assurance rating was for that audit, and following the follow-up work that they've done, would he change his now assurance rating as a result?
Mr Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. So that was partial assurance back then. From memory, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure it'd be partial assurance. Work is sort of getting pace now, I would say, in terms of not responding to the audit particularly, but in terms of the council's arrangements to deliver a new waste strategy and then a new waste service. It probably is fair to say it's taken a little while to get to that point, but the new AD that's arrived early this year is now starting to get to grips with that and make a difference in respect of that. So it's been a little bit of a slow burn, I suppose, since we did the original work, but it's starting to get pace now. So in terms of the assurance at the moment, I'd probably leave it where it was originally right now, but I can see there is a direction of travel, and a plan to address that is in place and being worked through.
I think it's probably worth noting that obviously there was a change of the government guidelines to waste and recycling partway through our process as well, so that's contributed to the delay on that. Councillor Brady.
Looking at the various Appendix 2s, there's a number of items, for example, on licensing that you've made recommendations on, but again, there is no specifics on those items that you're recommending. You've made a lot of comments, but again, I know it will be resolved when we start to see the IDGen report, but I think it would be useful for us at some stage to have sight of what those particular recommendations are. You have put it on some of them for us, but on others it would be useful to have.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So what we try to do in the summary, and if this is what the committee wants, then we can look to change it. But the summary is just trying to distill down the overall kind of findings and conclusions that we drew through the work. And then the recommendations tend to be very specific in terms of trying to address those. So we're trying to give you a flavour for the thoughts and the thought process and what we found. And obviously the recommendations are reflective of the conclusions that we've drawn. So there's probably something to be discussed in terms of what the content of the summaries are and exactly precisely what you would like to see.
Please, Chief Executive.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Bredding, following up from the suggestion from Ms Mills, my suggestion to that would be that at the next committee, colleagues from licensing and from information governance provide that short presentation that's been suggested, which gives the management response to the recommendations, and that will give you the assurance that you're looking for. So that then allows you as a committee to follow up on those minimal and partial assurances, and then get the kind of assurance that you're looking for. So hopefully that will do the trick.
Are there any additional questions? I've just got one observation on Appendix 1. We've got a column there for fraud risk. It strikes me that, for example, in information governance, that fraud risk is perhaps the thing we should. It's not the thing we should be most concerned with. There, it strikes me as it's more of a regulatory risk. Can we have a fuller suite of risks on there that we're assessing against if there's a normal model that people would use for this sort of report?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, that is possible, but obviously there's a whole range of risks that are being faced by all of our services. The reason we've got fraud risk is that we are reviewing the control framework, and the control framework is generally designed to prevent fraud and error, so which is why we focus in on that particular element. So I think it'd probably be worth taking it under advisement or having a conversation sort of outside of the meeting in terms of what would add value to the committee. So we're going to reshape this table anyway from following the earlier suggestions. So we'll weave that into there to get the right balance of information for the committee.
I see an exciting landscape report in our future. If I can come back to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it would be really helpful if the internal audit plan and the audits in the plan linked back to the Council's corporate risk register so that we can see what that clear link is, so that we can be assured that the corporate risks of the organisation are being reviewed in some way, shape or form. That would be helpful.
Chair, if I may. So I absolutely agree with that suggestion, and it doesn't come through in every meeting, but in our planning report that we provided to the last meeting, to the April meeting, I don't know, we do precisely that. We map each piece of audit work into which corporate risk that it's sort of supporting and helping to address.
And Councillor Dearson, I think you had a follow-up.
No, I was just really going to support, Chair, the points you made, and I get the, you're much more of an expert in this than I am. So, but I had written down operational risk, financial risk, strategic risk, reputational risk, etc. Because I know fraud's very important. It's one of the most important thing in the organisation. However, if you look at something like fire risk, there may be no fraud enrolled in that, but there could be huge reputational risk and financial risk if something comes out from housing or whatever, that there's an issue, or any one of our other things that don't necessarily have a fraud risk around them because of the nature of the business or the audit.
You can contribute on.
Thank you, Chair. So just to restate the point that Mr. Barnes made, is the primary function is to identify fraud risk because that is the highest and most significant risk for an authority. There are a whole host of other risks which are addressed through the audit process, and it's the assessment of those risks that contributes to the overall assessment given by the auditors in respect of their audit opinion. So you would expect to see those unpacked, and if there are, and those risks, the recommendations reflect those particular types of risk. So from my perspective, to avoid having a report which becomes then unreadable, the suggestion which is that where the assurance level is minimal or partial, that those risks are brought out, therefore, as a consequence of the recommendations in the presentation that we've just agreed to, so that you will gain the assurance that way. Because, as I say, there is a multitude of different risks which are looked at in the context of an individual audit opinion, but just in terms of red flagging, effectively, the biggest one, which this committee should be focused on. And after all, that's what counter fraud investigations report to you on, that is why that is there.
Thank you.
If I may as well, just to clarify, because there may be a slight misapprehension. The risk level in the planning document is our assess risk pre-doing the audit rather than post-doing the audit. So if you've got more positive results coming out of the audit, then that should give you some confidence that that risk is being mitigated effectively. And actually thinking about it just now, we don't actually amend that in the column. So you might be sitting there thinking that we've got a high level of assessed fraud risk, which we did have originally, or there's a high level of, no, it's something which is potentially could be ripe for fraud potentially. But once we've done the work, then we can give some confidence that that isn't actually the case. So I need to rethink about that as well and how we present that.
Understood. Ms Mills.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. before the meeting, members were talking about risks and how they relate to audit and other bits and pieces. And I think one of the things that members are struggling with is that this committee doesn't have oversight of the council's corporate or top strategic risks and be given assurance that they're being managed appropriately. I think that goes through cabinet. So it might be something that maybe if I could ask officers to take offline to think about, how could the audit committee be brought into that already established process with cabinet, but to be given so that they can seek assurance that the council's corporate big top risks are being managed effectively, and where there are not at tolerance level, there are actions in place to manage those and take that forward. Because I think that might be a little bit of a link in the circle that's not quite there, so that when at the end of the year the committee gives its opinion on whether or not it feels that risk management is effective, it can take on board that element, because at the moment they're just looking at the strategy. And I know it's not for this item, it's for maybe a separate item around risk management in general. Thank you.
Can you come back under?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms Mills. That's an excellent suggestion. I'm very happy to look at the kind of how the wiring works to include this committee.
Okay, if there are no other questions, members, is this report noted for forwarding to Cabinet? Okay, thank you. So our agenda item 5 is the external audit, provisional audit plan for 24-25. Ms Cox, if you could introduce the report for the year ended 31st of March 25.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to hand over to the external auditors on this one. This is their plan for how they're going to carry out the audit for the forthcoming year, including their risk basis and the materiality level. So I'll let them explain in more detail what's contained in that report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So evening. Good evening, members and officers. Apologies, can't be with you this evening. We were planning to for the original date, but diary commitments meant wasn't able to make it down this evening. So as Carrie says, take you through the key highlights of our audit plan, and the audit plan is there to set out how we plan to gain sufficient assurance to be able to issue our audit opinions upon the 24-25 financial statements and the annual governance statement, which forms part of the published pack. So starting on your page 10 with our materiality
Before
level.
we go ahead, can everybody hear this okay? Yeah, is there any way we can get the volume up on the remote feed, please? Sorry to interrupt you there, but it was very quiet in the room here.
No problem. Tell me when it's louder.
Any better? Thanks very much. If you can go ahead.
Okay, so if I start on page 10 of our plan, which is audit materiality, and we have moved our audit materiality threshold from 1% last year to 1.5%. That reflects that we closed down the unlawful payment issue in the last audit, and therefore that reduces the audit risk incumbent within the audit from our perspective, and therefore are able to set a higher materiality level within our range at 1.5%, as I say, which would equate to £861,000. That would mean that we would report any audit differences to you of £43,000 and above when we present our audit results report in January, following the conclusion of the audit. In terms of audit risks, flicking back a couple of pages to pages 7 to 9 of our audit plan, whilst we weren't able to perform a full audit last year, the audit risks are very similar, having had planning discussions with management. We have 4 audit risks that I would say are relatively normal to a council like yours. So we have 2 standard fraud risks, which would be in any public sector audit plan to mitigate the risk of management overriding controls to report a more favourable financial position. and a standard suite of procedures to address that. And then we look at the two biggest items on the council's balance sheet, namely the pension liability and or asset, depending on where the pension fund ends up at the end of the year, and the valuation of property, plant and equipment, including investment properties. So they are designated in the audit plan, as you will see. This year, though, we do have one new audit area of focus in relation to a new auditing standard for leases, International Financial Reporting Standard 16, which is an enhancement on a previous standard and means in essence that any entity has to report on its balance sheet all leases, whether they were previously classified as an operating lease or a financial lease, with the effect that any organisation should therefore be disclosing fully all the liabilities that they have at a balance sheet position. We haven't designated this as a significant or an inherent audit risk because we don't think that the impact is likely to be material based on discussions that we've had with officers in the finance team, but there is an amount of work that the council needs to do to prove the figure, and clearly we need to get comfortable that the preparation of that figure and the disclosures within the financial statements are appropriate. The detail behind all of those risks that I've just taken you through are set out in section 2. In relation to value for money, last year we reported on 2 issues, which I took you through when I presented the audit results report earlier in the year. One of those concluded, which was the unlawful transactions issue. So we have done, and that is all complete. We do need to follow up on the other risk weakness that we identified in relation to social housing standards, and we will be completing the remaining risk planning procedures next week. In terms of a timeline, we have agreed an audit window with Carrie and the finance team for the audit, but that is clearly dependent on the publication of the financial statements and the annual governance statement, and having adequate supporting working papers available for that audit window. And we have been very specific in a letter that we issued to all Section 151 officers on the 3rd of June about the arrangements every council needs to have in place for that. In terms of the team, you have both Rachel and I on the team again for this year, and full support from a team below that to carry out all the procedures that underpin those audit risks that I have taken you through. I think, Chair, probably best to pause there, but happy to go into questions from members as you see fit.
Members, any questions? I've got 2. So, Councillor Brennan first.
Yes, I noticed from your report that again is going to be disclaimed accounts. And what I would like to ask is, are you happy that the audit you're carrying out or have carried out, that all the transactions in the last financial year have been, as far as you can assess, appropriately recorded, and therefore moving forward, can we then be sort of reasonably certain that the closing balance from the last accounts, then giving us the opening balance for this current year's accounts, are, as far as we can assess, correct? And therefore, can we start moving forward and not keep having disclaimed accounts?
Very appropriate question to ask. And in summary, it is part of a what's being badged in the sector as a rebuilding exercise. So as you rightly say, the 23-24 financial statements were subject to a disclaimed audit opinion because we could not gain sufficient audit assurance over closing balances. So our plan and our focus for the 24-25 financial year to which this plan relates is to get assurance over all of the transactions that occurred within that year, and therefore move towards being able to be or have more confidence over closing balances in a number of areas. But you cannot gain complete closing balance assurance if you do not have assurance over the opening balances and therefore only have assurance over the movement in the year in between. The National Audit Office have issued, subsequent to our audit plan, guidance on how audit firms, not just ours, but any audit firm operating in the sector, can think about rebuilding that assurance with a specific focus on the reserves position, because that is the most important figure, both for you as members and officers in managing the council's operations going forward, but equally for the public in reviewing the financial statements and kind of the outcomes that the council derives in any one financial year. So whilst it is more likely than not that the 24-25 audit opinion will be disclaimed to some extent, and that extent is how much assurance we can get through those procedures I have just set out, it is, and we are on a journey to rebuild assurance with you as a council and all other councils to get back to a clean audit opinion on the most advantageous timeline that is available, given both capacity of the finance team and audit firms operating in the sector to do so.
Councillor Redding, I think you want to come back on that.
Sorry, may I follow up on that then, please? Because obviously, from what you've said, do we have any indication of how long this timeline is going to be?
So the general indication in, again, a guidance document that's been issued by the Financial Reporting Council, which is the oversight body for audit firms, is it takes a minimum of 3 years to rebuild audit assurance to get to an unqualified clean audit opinion.
Ms Mills, and then I'll take Councillor Dearson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions to ask, if that's okay. Firstly, what were the reasons for you not being able to gain assurance over the closing balances and the in-year movements for 23-24? Was that due to issues with the accounts, or was that due to the fact that you didn't do any work because of the backstop date? That's my first question. I don't know if you want to come back on that.
Okay, there are some historic issues that will no doubt be covered. But...
So happy to give a brief summary, Chair. So that was covered in our auditor's annual report for the 23-24 financial year, and in summary, the council did not publish financial statements until late January 25, and therefore there was insufficient time to perform audit procedures ahead of the 28th of February backstop date.
Okay, thank you, Chair. You mentioned in your presentation, and it's detailed in the report, about it's essential to have high quality working papers and evidence that the council's resources, etc. I just wondered, has there ever been a particular issue in relation to our working papers not being of a high quality? And if there are, could you let us know what that was and then have officers address those?
So one of the issues that is pertinent in here is that a full audit has not been possible for the last 3 financial years because of the significant transaction history issue that we addressed through value for money, which prohibited being able to do a full audit, and therefore there is no history to date of there being sufficient adequate high quality working papers that we can rely upon. What I would say is that Rachel and the team have held workshops with Carrie and her team about what a good set of quality working papers look like, and are building the programme to be able to provide those to support the audit. So this year's audit really feels like it's back to kind of square one, and it's the first part of redefining the audit history to be able to have that knowledge of how good audit is in terms of a robust set of financial statements published on the due date and then supported by those working papers to which you refer.
Thank you. And Councillor Dearson.
Sorry, Chair. No, just have a couple of questions. I appreciate why there may have been the disclaimer previously, and as Ms. Mills mentions, in 2023. And I also appreciate that this year there looks like there's going to be much more substantial work done around trying to get rid of this disclaimer within 3 years. And I was going to ask a similar question to the one that Lorraine asked. But I suppose, is there any opportunity this year, rather than just having a disclaimer, but once the work's been completed, to have some further narrative around that disclaimer that starts to give confidence, not only to us, but to the general public, that that the concerns that go back to 2021 are starting to disappear?
So, in order to address that question, which I think is really pertinent, our audit results report in January, which will set out the key findings from the audit, will have a key section of it that will runs through, in essence, all elements of the council's primary statements, all of the comprehensive income and expenditure statements, and then all of the balance sheet items, and set out whether we've been able to perform all of the audit procedures and how much assurance we have been able to get against each of them, and where we have not been able to gain assurance. For example, is it because it's an opening balance issue that is predicated on a previous year's disclaimed audit opinion, or is it because there has been an issue in 24-25 with the provision of information that prohibits us from getting full assurance? So visually in my head, it's feeling like it's a table that is RAG rated red, amber and green, that will show you very clearly as members, and this document will clearly be in the public domain and therefore council taxpayers, where we have been able to gain those assurances. And over the 3-year period to which I referenced to get to a clean audit opinion, you should see the level of green increase year on year until the full page is green, and therefore you have an unqualified audit opinion. So that's the plan.
Councillor Dearson.
Sorry, Chair. Now, that's fantastic news, and thank you for that. From what you're saying, hopefully we should be in a position by 26-27 to get rid of the disclaimer before we go into devolution. Can I just ask through the Chair, does the external audit team have any concerns about their capacity to deliver on those, on the points that you've just mentioned that you're going to look into over the next 3-year period, that may impact not being able to achieve that goal?
I take it that's okay to answer, Chair. We have no concerns about our capacity to deliver the work programme set out in this audit plan. We are developing the plan to be able to build back those assurances that I referenced earlier from the national guidance that was issued on the 5th of June. And as I say, it's over a 3-year period, and we are confident that over that period we would have sufficient resources to be able to do that rebuild. But we need to have ongoing discussions with Lance, Carrie and the team, because doing additional audit work requires additional capacity and support from them. Some elements of it on historic data from previous years to be able to get comfort over what is in this year an opening balance issue, and to get to that final closing balance position. So it would be a team effort, so to speak, to get to that end goal.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Councillor Dearson.
Sorry, I only have 2 more questions. And the first one on the back of the point, or the update just given by the external auditor, do we have any concerns then internally that we have the capacity to support that?
Ms. Cox, that's probably one for you.
Thank you. I'm now sort of a permanent chief accountant in post, and my main aspect of my role is to deliver on the accounts and the audit as well. So that's one bonus. We do still have some vacancies in the team that we'll be looking to recruit as soon as possible, but it will be my priority to ensure that the audit is done within the time frame.
Thank you. Sorry, thanks. Chair, I just have one final question for the external auditor. I don't know if it's...
Go ahead.
But it's probably linked to the Treasury team as well. Do we yet have what the current 2025 pension fund looks like? I know that in 2022 we had a liability of 12.4. In 2023 we went 18 million as an asset, so we moved by 30 million. And then in 24 we went to a liability of 1.3 million. I know it's a moving target. I know there's lots of external things that go into this, but I also note that the external auditors have this under their significant risks and the work they're going to do around that. So it does impact our balance sheet. So I don't know if we have that information yet via the Essex Pension Fund, and do we know what the number is?
Ms. Cox?
Yeah, the figure that we will be showing in the accounts is 1.125 million, so just a shift of 0.175, sorry.
But still a liability?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms Mills?
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions that I have. For the external auditor, obviously I've noted from your report that you've completed your walkthrough processes. So your walkthrough processes, is there any particular issues that have come to light as a result of those that the committee need to be aware of at this time? And then my second question is probably more to officers about how the council has approached the implementation of the IFRS 16. And are we confident with the processes that we've adopted? Do we use any sort of specialist expertise to help us with that?
Ms Johnson, if you can take the first question and I'll come back to you, Ms Cox.
So in relation to walkthroughs, I will defer to Rachel to give that answer. Rachel?
Thank you, Mark. For walkthroughs, we have conducted interviews with the members of the finance team, and we have done most of the processes that we need to cover. We have not identified issues that are not yet flagged in the plan. We will be following through some of the work in relation to housing, which is part of our risk that we identified as part of the VFM. And we will be following through some of the processes that are done at year end, but at this time, I have nothing to flag in relation to that.
Okay, thank you, Ms Mears. Ms Cox, if you can take the question about the new lease standards.
Thank you. Yes, so the detailed work was carried out by my predecessor with extensive conversations internally with departments to identify the leases that we've had. I believe she's reached out to the external auditors as well. I don't know the in-depth if that's been a detailed conversation or not. We have a code of practice we follow, so Jean was following the code of practice to ensure that the disclosures that we've carried out are correct. I've run through the working paper with her as kind of a sense check. So we're quite sort of comfortable with the figures that we're going to be showing, and hopefully the audit won't flag anything significant as part of that.
Thank you for that assurance. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I would like to say thank you to EY for joining us this evening. And with that, members, is this report noted? Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to item number 6, which is the Annual Housing Complaints Report 23-24 and 24-25. Mr. Geller, if you can take us through the report.
Thank you. Good evening, members. The report you have before you is the first return of what will be an annual submission in relation to the Council's complaint handling within this Housing Services Department. Now, on the 1st of the 4th, 2025, the Housing Ombudsman introduced a new complaint handling code that all social landlords had to adopt. Now, the code identified a criteria for complaint. It stipulated how social housing providers should approach complaints from residents and advised on how complaints should be captured, catalogued and responded to. Now, part of this includes a monitoring process which then results in an annual report which is to be brought before members and subsequently made public so as to demonstrate our work towards improving our services. Now, members, you will have before you 2 reports in the appendices. The first report for 23-24 was assessed prior to the Council adopting its new housing complaints policy, which came into effect in November 2024. Now, as set out in 5.2 of the report, the annual assessment does not fully meet the requirements of the code due to our systems and processes not fully being in place, and members will notice differences in the data sets, particularly in relation to how the complaints are broken down. Now, this point was raised with the Housing Ombudsman, but they've directed that we should complete a report, hence its inclusion here anyway. Now, under 5.4, members will note in section 3 of Appendix 1 of the annual report for 23-24 that Housing Services received 27 Stage 1 complaints, of which 8 were progressed to Stage 2. Now, this represents an escalation rate of 29.6%. Moving forward to Appendix 2 of the annual report, the 2024-25 one, now I can confirm that this does meet the requirements of the Complaint Handling Code, because by this point we had adopted the new code and changed our policies. This is evident in Section 6 of Appendix 2, which shows a greater breakdown of our complaints data. And I also can advise that while members will note that there were 47 new complaints at Stage 1, only 6 progressed to Stage 2 of the complaints processed, and that represented an escalation of 12.5%. And lastly, members will also notice that on page 34 of Appendix 2, there is a section that refers to lessons learned in terms of the complaints that were made, and also a service improvement plan on 36, which details how we can overcome and take those lessons and improve the service. Now, data from both these reports are to be made public on our website and shared with the Housing Ombudsman, forming part of our ongoing activities and the drive towards service improvement. So, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Bredding.
Thank you. Obviously, I was mainly worried about the 24-25 data, historic, when we have to deal with what's going on. But on page 28-29 on complaints, under 4.8, there's talks of a quarterly report being made available to members. Will that report be brought to this committee so that we can see the progress that's being made?
Yes, I'm happy for that to happen. Yes.
Ms Mills, I think you had a question.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I think I wanted to say that it's a very comprehensive report that's been produced and quite an honest appraisal, I think, of your arrangements. But obviously, I do have some questions, which I would imagine you would expect. First of all, will the committee be provided with an update on the progress of the Complaint Service Improvement Plan? Perhaps maybe every sort of 6 months or so that we can see and gain assurance about the improvements that are being made in the process. So that's sort of one area. And then the 2 sort of other questions that I had were around getting some assurance that things are improving. So, for example, with the complaints about both complaint handling, so complaints about complaint handling and complaints relating to staff, are these spread, so for 24-25, were these spread across the year, or were they more concentrated at the beginning part of the year, so that you could able to then give us some assurance that if they were more at the beginning of the year and less at the end of the year, there's been some improvement, and then we can take assurance from that. So that was kind of my follow-up question on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So in relation to the first question, yes, happy to bring if you like, a mid-year summary of how we're progressing in terms of the service improvements to a future committee. In terms of the spread of complaints, if I can take that one away and look at the data and get that data and get that information, send it back to you.
Through the Chair, thank you. That would be really helpful, because I think the committee needs to seek the assurance element from it that things are improving, rather than concentrating on the nitty-gritty detail of the complaints. Thank you.
Let me just bring you in, Angela, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to provide assurance to this committee, of course, the progress of the Housing Improvement Programme is overseen by the Housing Improvement Programme Board, which reports to Cabinet. And so transparency is assured that way. It is also on the work plan for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So the substantive improvements under the programme are dealt with in respect of those two forums. If additionality is required, then it may be that you can put that on the work plan, Chair, because there will be a lot of reports and a lot of information already in circulation, and I wouldn't want to duplicate effort with the greatest of respect. And in terms of the complaints, they are seized of this committee because of the way the terms of reference are stacked. So this is why complaints specifically are brought to you to look at in terms of governance, learning and performing that circle. What you will also start to see is that we will bring corporate complaints to you also, so that you can see the improvements we're making in that space. And again, it's really around you reviewing the performance of the corporate, or of the body corporate, in dealing with complaints, rather than overview of the individual substantive housing improvement programme itself, for clarity.
Thank you. That was helpful. Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Benfleet.
Thank you, Chair. I was just reading through your learnings, and it says here that we had some complaints about no response to correspondence, and it says the importance of responding promptly to communications from residents. Have we got any SLAs on that? Like what turnaround are we? What's promptly is what I'm getting at.
So I'll have to take the question away about the exact time frames. They are stipulated in the complaints handling code. What I can say is that historically complaints were coming in, they could go to a number of officers that would take a view as to whether a complaint was received. We have a new complaints, a customer relations officer that literally focuses on taking in complaints and responding to them within the timescales. The timescales that we've got are quite defined within the code. So, for example, we have 10 days to review cases at stage 1, I believe. And in terms of acknowledgement, we have so many days to issue the acknowledgement as well. But I will confirm those timescales exactly with you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay. Members, is that report noted for taking forward to Cabinet? Thank you. Agenda item 7, our accounting policies for the 24-25 year. Ms. Cox, if you could please introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is looking for member approval of some changes to our accounting policies. The accounting policies are the basis on which we build the accounts and prepare the accounts and actually perform part of the statements themselves. Normally we wouldn't expect annual changes. It's just when there are large differences in the accounting standards or assumptions used within those accounts. So there are 2 proposed changes in this report. The first is on depreciation. That's just the timing of when we apply depreciation and looking to apply it at the end of the year, so that the first full year of depreciation will be in the year after that asset is brought into use. The reason for that change is to bring it in line with our MRP. It's actually a change in estimation rather than policy, but the policy has just been reworded to reflect that. The second change is through the IFRS 16. So essentially the purpose of IFRS 16 is to bring onto the balance sheet any right of use assets. So that's where we may have a lease or a contract where we have the implicit right of using that asset, and therefore we have to reflect that ourselves. It's offset with a finance liability, so there's nil impact on the balance sheet. And over the course of the lease, there's also nil impact on our net revenue position. What that means when you actually see the final accounts this year, the depreciation side of it, nothing will look any different for you. For the leases, it means that there's now a 3.6 million right of use asset as at the 1st of April 2024, offset with the 3.6 million finance lease liability. As we've already mentioned, the auditors will be looking at those figures as part of their audit. We have made some small changes to other policies, but that's just removing any figures that are referred to, because ultimately we want the policies to be descriptive and that the figures remain in the notes and the statements to the financial statements. So there's not been any change in what they're meaning or how they're being applied. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions on the changes? Ms Mills?
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't have any specific questions, just a request really that in future, would it be possible to have a marked up version as part of the agenda rather than a clean copy so that we can see what the changes were, what's been removed, what's been added? Because without comparing to what you had previously, I can't do that. So that would just be a request for future for that sort of thing. But no questions. I think the accounting policies are fairly standard to what I'm used to with other local authorities, so it's fine.
Okay. Ms Cox, is that something that we can easily accommodate? Okay. Thanks for the suggestion. Are there any other questions, members? Okay. So with no further questions, I'll move the recommendation set out in paragraph 3.1 of our report that we approve the accounting policies for the 2024 accounts. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Leary? And is that agreed, members? Thank you. That concludes our business for tonight. The meeting is closed at 20:13. Thank you all for attending and for your attention. Cheers.